I'm going to start my speech off by asking everybody to use their imagination. I would like for everyone to picture taking a trip to Disneyland as a child. Imagine the warm air, the blue skies, the sound of the rides, the smell of the foods, people laughing and enjoying their time, and so much more. Sounds fun, right? Now, I'd like you to imagine being a young child who may or may not have been to Disneyland for the very first time, and imagine yourself running a fever. Imagine yourself with a running nose, with a cough, colic spots in the back of your mouth that are sore and just making you all around miserable, red, watery eyes. And now imagine your parents rushing you to the ER, missing out on months and weeks of anticipation for this fun time with your family, only to find out that you have an illness called measles. An illness that is painful and yet preventable by getting vaccinated. This is exactly what happened to several children in December 2014. In order to increase the amount of children receiving vaccinations, professionals need to educate the public on the benefits and the background of vaccinations. Professionals need to let this know that this is just a misunderstood medical advancement. They should require children attending public schools to receive vaccines and come up with a spending plan towards vaccinations to show that doctors are not only after the money. Vaccinations have a long history. For example, in the 1500s, the first documented vaccination started making its debut in China and in India and several other foreign countries over that way. This vaccine was for smallpox. The process was quite different than it is now. To vaccinate at this time, it involved grinding up the smallpox scabs and blowing that matter up into the nose. It was called a nostril inoculation. They would literally go pick the scabs off of people, grind them up, and put them in the nose. Inoculations have been practiced by scratching matter from smallpox sores into the skin. So they would literally just take the scabs and open up a spot into the skin and put the scabs in there to give somebody the dead vaccine. It is difficult to pinpoint when the practice began, as some sources claim that the dates are early as 200 BCE. And many, many years after this, there were many outbreaks, millions of deaths, and numerous strategies discussed for prevention. In 1813, the U.S. Vaccine Agency was established. The U.S. Congress and James Madison signed an act to encourage vaccination, and they hired their first national vaccine agent, James Smith. He was a Baltimore physician. Their hope was to make vaccines readily available and even shipped vaccines to potential patients. Imagine having the convenience of being able to have vaccines in your home and doing them yourself versus going somewhere else and getting them. Sounds convenient. Although it may be an unknown fact, vaccination, before they are released, vaccinations are actually studied for 10 to 15 years before even being released to the general public. The first step in this process requires several years in a laboratory, and many, 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 many research strategies are performed on this vaccination. This is where scientists research and identify the antigens. An antigen, it's a toxic or other foreign substance that induces an immune response in the body. That can prevent the disease from happening if the antigen is introduced into our body system. After the investigation has been cleared by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the vaccine then goes through at least 3 more phases of clinical trials on human volunteers to test the efficiency of the vaccine. Many parents will argue that vaccines are the big reason for increased autism diagnoses. But there have been hundreds of studies that have debunked this theory. By this, I mean they have proven this theory wrong several times. According to an article published by the Journal of Pediatrics by Dr. Frank DiStefano and several scientists they performed a study on this subject, and they focused on what the relevance was between vaccines and the autism diagnosis. The doctor and the scientists started off by looking at the number of antigens from vaccines during the first 2 years of life. This result showed that the total amount of antigens in somebody that was non-autistic versus somebody who was autistic was virtually the same. Children who have autism have been basically products of study, because people like to say that the mercury or the aerosol that is in the vaccines or was in vaccines is what caused the autism diagnosis, but that has been taken out. The aerosol is a mercury-based contamination of multi-dose vials of vaccine. Since this has been removed, the autism community is having a harder time arguing that vaccines are the cause of autism. Allison Singer is the former executive vice president of the communication of autism resources at Autism Speaks. She says, even though the foundation has done almost every research procedure possible, they have never been happy with the answer that they have received, which is there is no causal link between autism and the vaccination. A downfall of choosing not to vaccinate is the disruption of herd immunity. Herd immunity is the resistance that is created to a disease or an illness because so many people have been vaccinated. However, what many people are not realizing is that the reason most people can get away with not vaccinating is because of herd immunity, because so many people have this vaccination that it's harder for this vaccine harder for this disease to live and reproduce when there's the antigens in the body fighting it off. Herd immunity is basically what kills off certain diseases such as polio and measles and mumps and so on and so forth. Many people who do not believe in vaccinating are now sending their unvaccinated children to school. This is a terrible idea because sending your unvaccinated child only puts other children at risk. Children who may not be able to be vaccinated, children who may not be able to really even be around in public because of an illness that they have themselves. Sending your unvaccinated child potentially puts these people at a risk for death. And not only does it put ill people at risk for death, it puts infants at risk for death and elderly at risk for death because they have a compromised immune system. Another reason many people are against vaccinations is because they believe vaccines are a way for the pharmaceutical companies to make money, when in reality, many doctors put forth their own money and research in vaccines and hopes to maybe boost the amount of people who choose to get vaccinations. There's really more of a bigger benefit than there is negativity. I mean, you're killing these terrible, harmful diseases in hopes to create a longer life. So, in conclusion, vaccines are a personal choice of those who are in the situation and choosing on whether or not they want to vaccinate their child. However, when it comes to life and death, vaccination should strongly be considered as a major parenting choice. Without vaccinations, there wouldn't be a herd immunity that is created, and without that, there would be more deaths by tragic disease.